Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a ranking list for the Noble Knight archetype. So if you do enjoy this video and you would like to see other archetypes done in the same fashion, go and leave that in the comment section down below. Always nice to see. If you do like it, consider leave a like. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Always helps, and super close to 400 subscribers at the moment of recording. I'm like 399, so it'd be really awesome to hit that milestone. But yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, not in any particular order, we're going to go and start off with Lady of the Lake. Now, Lady of the Lake wasn't as good as it could have been. I feel like they just made the effects pretty much as mediocre as they get for no reason. I mean, you have to run the normal Artorigus to get its first effect off, and then I guess its second effect to reduce a level 5 Noble Knight monster to a level 4 is useful, but then it gets banished. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a D ranking just because it was never as helpful as it could have been. But, you know, it is what it is. Moving on to Guinevere, Queen of the Noble Arms. Now, this one was a lot better in terms of being impactful and helpful for the deck. Or you're able to send it with BORZ just to be able to get that extra equip card you need in your graveyard, and its bonus effects of making a light monster protected from being destroyed by card effects is really nice, and then the dark effect, giving it a catastrophe effect, was always awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and give Guinevere a B ranking just because it is a bit unfortunate if you draw it and that's the only Noble Arms equip spell card because the effect is a hard once per turn. So I definitely feel like it's a B rank. Next is old Two Tales of the Noble Knights. Now, of course, this is going to be an S rank. Not only does it let you search out a warrior monster, it's generic, and it lets you fill your graveyard with Noble Arms equip spell cards as cost, and you get an additional special summon. So it just does everything you need to do. It's been broken in other archetypes, but for Noble Knights, it's amazing. So, of course, I gotta give the S rank. Then, moving on to MERLIN, another card that I feel could have been a lot better, but it kind of just missed. It was really helpful back when you didn't have ways to get MEDRAUT or any of your other Noble Knights out, but it does have an alright effect, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in the C rank, just because you contribute it, and if it doesn't get stopped, you can get your MEDRAUT or you know, any other Noble Knight you need. And then its effect in the graveyard is pretty alright, but I've only used it maybe a handful of times out of all the times playing. And the only reason why it's getting such a low rank is because it can get ashed and impermed on summon so often, and of course Veilered on summon, so that's a little bit weaker. Moving on to Morgan, the Enchantress of Avalon. Now, this card, if it just said if you control a Noble Knight, it would have been amazing. Or if it was a little bit more generic than that, maybe discard a Noble Arms or Noble Knight from your hand in order to activate it, just so that it was a little bit more useful. But you have to have a Noble Knight and a Noble Arms on the field, so if your opponent tries stopping you way before you get your Noble Arms out on the field, this card is just dead. So, unfortunately, I'm going to go and put this in the D rank. It's just not as helpful as all the other hand traps. Next, we got just the vanilla Noble Knight Artorigus. It's just an 1800 beater vanilla monster. Just put it in the D rank. Doesn't really do anything unless you play Rescue Rabbit and you want to play like a classic build of Noble Knights. So, yeah, definitely a D rank. And one card that I actually forgot was even a Noble Knight. That's Noble Knight JOAN. No one, I don't think anybody that has played Noble Knights seriously put it in their deck and played it. Just not useful at all. Its effect is absolutely terrible in my opinion. So of course, going to get that D rank. I don't know, it's just really bad. Next, Noble Knight GAWAYN. Now GAWAYN is pretty cool. I've always liked this card. It lets you get a special summon if you control a normal monster, light monster. So it works well with other archetypes if you want to kind of have a rank 4 toolbox if you have like normal monsters or something like that. But It's pretty cool with MEDRAUT and BORZ, of course, and then Yvonne as well. And if you run the regular vanilla Artorigus, of course you can get into a rank 4 faster. So I'm going to go and give Artorigus a B ranking, just because it's not as helpful. There used to be an FTK back in the day that utilized MEDRAUT and GAWAYN, and then you went to Excalibur and Blade Armor Ninja. So it is useful, but not the best card, especially since you have to have a normal monster that's light. So if you have any of your other Noble Knights, it could just be dead. Next, of course, I'm pretty sure you already know if you've played this deck before, what rank Noble Knight MEDRAUT's going to get, and it is of course S, just because in my personal opinion this is your play starter, or one of the best play starters for the Noble Knight archetype. Just gets all your plays going, you always want to see it, its effect is amazing. Like I told you, or like I've been saying, it works well with GAWAYN and other cards because it is treated as a normal monster while face up on the field, which is really cool and an interesting concept that you know, you haven't really seen, or at least I haven't really seen, other than the Noble Knights. But yeah, becomes a dark, increases its level by 1, and you can special summon a Noble Knight from your deck. Pretty much does everything you need if it goes off, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it an S. Next, Noble Knight GAWAYN. Now this card was really cool in the early Noble Knight builds, and its effect isn't terrible. It lets you bring back one of your Noble Knights from your graveyard back to your hand, and then destroys a Noble Arms equipped spell card, and it also is a normal monster while face up on the field. I also forgot that. So it's pretty decent. I'm going to go ahead and give it a B rank as well, just because it's not seen as much, and adding it really doesn't matter unless you're running a build with GAWAYN and GAWAYN, which you don't see too often. So yeah, it's a decent effect, just don't see it too often, so it's going to get a B. Next, Noble Knight Drystan. Now, even though it's my favorite artwork in the Noble Knights, which is another thing I've been thinking about as another series, if you guys would like to see like a series where I rank a archetype's artwork, that would be pretty cool in my opinion. So if you want to see that, go and leave those in the comment section down below. But yeah, Noble Knight Drystan, overall a pretty cool effect. It protects all of your smaller Noble Knights while it's on the field, and it gets a pop of a face-up card on the field, which is really nice. You can pop spells, traps, monsters if you're able to. So overall a solid effect. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a rank. So yeah. Moving on to the next one, that is Noble Knight BORZ. Now BORZ is also solid. Early Noble Knight decks would just do MEDRAUT into BORZ, BORZ search another equip spell card while sending the equip spell cards to the graveyard. Both become level 5, and if your play gets stopped before that, you can at least get Guinevere to the graveyard and have it as a Catastor effect, which is really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and give BORZ also an A rank. Just because it's not the craziest effect, in my opinion, but it helps you get your traps nowadays to the graveyard, your Gwen, so it's pretty nice, but I don't think it warrants that S rank, because if you only open him, he's more of a stall card if you have an equip spell card, because you can get Gwen to the graveyard and just equipped, have a Catastor effect, so it's pretty decent, but not the best. Next we got Noble Knight PELLINORE, and if I said that wrong, my apologies. Another card you don't see as often, but it has the effect of where it becomes a dark and increases its level by 1, which is kind of cool. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard while equipped with the Noble Arms equip spell card, target one Noble Arms in the graveyard and add that target to your hand. So it has a way to kind of recycle the Noble Arms, but that's not a very helpful effect, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a D rank, just because, you know, you don't really use it that much, and it is only going to be used for like the Link 5, which you want your Noble Arms in the graveyard usually. So I mean, if there's an instance where you need a Noble Arms equip spell card, maybe it can be helpful, but you know, I just don't really find it as good. Next, we have Noble Knight Brothers. Now Brothers has a solid effect. Not only does it let you special summon up to 2 Noble Knights, but it lets you also return 3 Noble Knights and or Noble Arms from your graveyard to the deck and draw 1 card. So it's spamming monsters and drawing cards. I'm going to go ahead and give that an S rank. I did consider bumping it down to an A rank, but Noble Knight Brothers is amazing. In the more recent builds that I've been playing, I've been putting it at 3 a lot of the time, and I've just grown to really enjoy this card. Alright, so moving on to Noble Knight Bedwyr. If I said that wrong, again, I apologize. This card, I feel, was another one that could have had a lot of potential, but they just made it a very mediocre effect, and you don't see this Noble Knight being played too often, even though I do think that the effect is pretty cool if you are running a certain build. I've said in previous videos, I've always tried to make like a Noble Drystan build work, and this was one of the cards that I would run in it, just because you can move an equip spell card to a monster on the field, so during your opponent's turn, you can go ahead and move it onto Drystan and get a free pop. That was always the idea, but it never really panned out, so I gotta go ahead and give this a D. Just underwhelming, and overall I just feel not a very strong Noble Knight. Moving on to Noble Knight Kustonen. Now this card is pretty cool because it gives you an additional normal summon when it's used for material as a link, synchro, or Xyz, so that's pretty strong in itself. And you could special summon it if you control a Noble Arms, which that is kind of the drawback. You have to have Noble Arms on the field in order to special summon it, but overall a very solid card. I'm going to go and give that an A, just because it can help extend, and for the most part you are going to have a Noble Arms equip spell card on the field, so it's usually pretty live to get that special summon. Then we have Noble Knight Pellinore. Now this card is pretty cool. It's basically another Drystan. You can target one Noble Arms equip spell card equipped to a card, or to this card, and one face-up monster your opponent controls, destroy them, and then draw one card. So you get that pop and a draw. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the same category as Noble Knight Drystan. They're both pretty solid, so yeah. Moving on to Noble Knight Yvonne. Yvonne is pretty strong, but the drawback on this is that once you use its effect, you are locked to Noble Knights. So that is a bit of a drawback. So I'm going to go ahead and give this an A tier, just because you can get play started with it, but once you do, you are locked to the Noble Knights, which one of the main combos does use Yvonne, so that's why it's so high up there. Just because you can go into the link, and it's just a free Isolde. Then we got Noble Knight, or Artorgus, King of the Noble Knights. Pretty cool card. Back in the day when this was first out and a lot of people were playing heavy back row, this card was just amazing. But nowadays, I'm going to go ahead and throw it into the C category, just because, yes, you get your Noble Arms equip spell cards and you can destroy back row, but a lot of the times you do run into a lot of decks that ain't running too much back row. I mean, if they have Mystic Mind on the field and you have more monsters, it doesn't do anything. But, you know, it is a pretty solid card. It can get big and can destroy back row. So, yeah. Then on to Sacred Noble Knight King Kustonen. Now, this card is probably my favorite Xyz for the Noble Knights. I'm going to go ahead and give it an S tier, just because not only can you return cards back to your opponent's hand, it does target, unfortunately, but it's still pretty strong if they're not playing a deck that, you know, plays around that. If it gets destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you get to Xyz using it as material on another Noble Knight. So it replaces itself, and it returns 2 cards that can be problematic for your opponents. So very strong in my opinion. So yeah, an S rank for that one. Next we have Noble Knight of Black Landsland. Now this is one of the original Noble Knights, of course. Came out in, I think, Abyss Rising. I could be wrong on that one, but it was pretty early on. And unfortunately, even though it's a pretty cool card, its effect isn't crazy good. And you have BORZ later on that just replaced it because BORZ became level 5. So overall, a pretty cool card, but I'm going to have to put it in the C just because you don't see too many builds playing it. It's a level 5, and sometimes it can brick, and why would you play this over, you know, something like BORZ, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm going to give it a C. Then Noble Knight Ektar. This is a pretty cool card. One card that I do think about playing every once in a while, just because if you have a lot of Noble Knights in your graveyard, it's just a monster you can keep bringing back. You can spell summon it from hand or graveyard by banishing 2 Noble Knight monsters, so pretty cool. It has a pretty strong effect, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a B. I just don't use it that much, so you know, this might be one that could be even considered an A rank, but overall pretty cool. Next, Ignoble Knight of High Landsland. Now this card is pretty cool as well, but unfortunately I'm going to have to give it a C rank as well, because it just doesn't do enough. I mean, if you destroy something by battle, you can add a Noble Knight or Noble Arms, which is pretty cool, and when it is synchro summoned, you grab a Noble Arms from the deck and equip it to him, which is alright, but just not a very strong effect. You have the Noble Knights that have way better effects, so if you are running a synchro variant of the Noble Knights, it'd be way better just to run the Noble Knights, in my opinion. Next we got Sacred Noble Knight of King Artorigus. Pretty solid. I'll give it a B just because it isn't super strong. It targets and destroys, so not the craziest effect, but it does replace itself, which is nice. But for the most part, you'll usually want to set up into the Custonin and then bring him out when Custonin goes to the graveyard. So it is strong, but B is where I'm going to have to put it. Next we have Last Chapter of the Noble Knights, a card I don't really run, but it's kind of just a monster reborn for the Noble Knights, so I'll go ahead and give it a B, because it can be useful, but I personally just don't play it. Then Heritage of the Chalice, of course that's going to be S. You can search a Noble Knight or Noble Arms. If a Noble Knight is destroyed while it has an equip spell card, you get to add that back to your hand, which is just amazing. Now onto the Noble Arms. We got Noble Arms of Gallatin. Gallatin's pretty strong. Gives you 1000 attack, but you lose 200 attack every standby phase, every one of your standby phases, and it does come back if it's destroyed. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the B, just because sometimes you will get stuck with it and it'll make your monster just lose attack every one of your standby phases, and you can be put in a very difficult situation. Noble Arms of Afterdutir. I've always liked this card. I know a lot of people don't really care for it, but being able to pop a set card is very strong. It's helped me out a lot, but I do see how people don't really like it. It makes your monster lose 500 attack permanently if the card is popped, and then there's not too many people setting cards in current metas, so Afterdutir is just there for the name most of the time, so I'll go ahead and give it a C, even though I think it's an underrated Noble Arms. Next we have Noble Arms of Caliburn. This is one of the stronger Noble Arms in my opinion, so I'm going to go ahead and give it an A rank, just because it gives your monster 500 attack, and you can gain 500 life points once per turn, and that is not a hard once per turn, so very solid. If you go into the MEDRAUT effect, full combo, you'll be able to gain 1500 life points at the end of the full combo, so pretty nice. Next we have Noble Arms of Destiny. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the S category, especially for the Noble Arms, just because it protects your monster from being destroyed by battle or by card effect once per turn. So there are some situations where you're able to get your monster up to like 3700 attack, maybe even 4000 if you have Guinevere, and they have to get over it twice, which can be a pain in some situations. Then we have Noble Arms of Excalibur. Now, unfortunately, this card does not come back when it's destroyed. That's like the only downside to this card. It prevents your monsters from being targeted, which is always nice. And then you can banish it as long as it wasn't in your graveyard this turn, or the turn it was sent there. The next turn you can banish it and target one of your Xyz monsters, and then kind of do a rank up or go into another Noble Knight Xyz monster using that monster as material. So pretty cool, pushing for damage and stuff like that. If you have a used Custonin, just banish it, bring out Sacred Noble Knight of King Artorigus. Pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the A. Next we have Noble Arms of Clariant. Pretty cool card. You can attack directly by paying 500 life points, or the monster that it's equipped to can pay attack directly once you pay those life points. So very strong. If you didn't get locked to Noble Knights and you have this card, you can attack directly with it and then go into a Zeus if that's kind of the line you want to take. But if they have something where they kind of think they have you locked with a monster that can be destroyed or targeted or something, you can just poke at their life points directly. In time, especially, you can, if you're in battle phase, of course, you can attack directly and go for game there. Next, we have Noble Knights of the Round Table, the field spell. You know, when it originally came out, I don't even think there was as many targets as you need for the effects. What is it? You need 12 different Noble Knights in the graveyard for all of its effects, which I'm pretty sure there was 12 Noble Knights, but, you know, most decks weren't running all 12 names. So I think this is a card that could have been way better. I mean, it could have been like Camelot or something, and it could have had way better effects, but unfortunately this is the one we got. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in the D rank just because you never see it, and most of the effects aren't super crazy unless you have a lot of Noble Knights in the graveyard. Then we have Glory of the Noble Knights. Now this is pretty cool. It gets you your equip spell cards, but you have to target a Noble Knight on the field, which is sometimes unfortunate. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the B rank just because the monster has to be on the field and you have to target it. So if they book a moon or just get rid of it somehow, it could be dead. And then if your back row is full, if you have 4 equip spell cards, you can't even activate this because there's no spot to put the Noble Arms before it resolves. So a bit unfortunate. Now, Avalon, this card is probably the worst card printed for the Noble Knights. You never ever see it in any builds, and I've only ever successfully was able to activate it one time, and it did more harm than good because once you target 5 Noble Knight monsters in the graveyard, including at least 1 Artorgas monster and 1 Lancelin monster, banish those targets, and if you do, destroy all cards on the field. So it destroyed my entire field, destroyed my opponent's entire field, and you know, it wasn't really worth it. So yeah, this is definitely a D. And to the last card in the Noble Knight deck, that is Until the Noble Arms Are Needed Once Again. In my personal opinion, this is going to be an S rank, just because when it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to special summon a Noble Knight that doesn't have the same names of the monsters on your field and graveyard. So of course, Drystan, if BORZ and MEDRAUT are material on an Exceed monster, they're technically not on the field, so you can get those monsters. And overall, it just helps you extend, and if it's on the field, it lets you get an extra card from your deck to your hand. Overall, a very solid card. I definitely feel like it's an S rank, at least for this specific archetype. So yeah, that was the ranking video. Again, hopefully you guys did enjoy, and if you would like to see more videos like this, I wouldn't mind going over some of my archetypes that I like the most. But yeah, until next time, I'll see you guys later.